Слава Україні!
Hello everybody, my name is Paul and welcome back to the new news. I hope that everyone's having a fantastic night. I hope that everyone's having a fantastic day and has had a wonderful Sunday full of rest. I hope that you, your family, and your friends are safe, and if not, I hope that you find that safety and security in the very near future. There's been a ton of stuff that's been going on throughout the entire world, especially inside of Ukraine. There's been a ton of developments regarding the war, especially within the Kherson Oblast, which of course we'll get to all of those later on tonight. But generally speaking, most of the stuff that happens throughout the world that makes it to the news is usually not good. Generally speaking, you're talking about war, you're talking about death, you're talking about murders, you're talking about crime, you're talking about climate change, you're talking about major droughts, natural disasters, famine, disease, things that are affecting people greatly. Many people are suffering to the point that the United Nations even stated that at this point in history, this is the largest amount of refugees and internally displaced peoples ever in recorded history. So that's quite a significant amount, and that's because of a number of factors throughout the world. The great thing is that you guys have built an amazing community here, which I cannot thank you enough for. And that's because you guys allow us to be the news that gives back. 100% of everything we do here on the new news is for charity. Everything we do is for trying to raise money to help people throughout the world that are going through the very crises that we're talking about here on the news. And so if you check out the video description, you're going to see a ton of different donation links. Please be sure to check out all of them. I know a lot of people's focuses are on Ukraine, and please do check out the ones for Ukraine. We have plenty of them down there, including a new one from Ripley's Heroes. But also take a look at the other locations too. Places like Feed the Children, which help people in Central South America, as well as in Africa and the United States. Check out things. There are a ton of them that are there for Somalia, Hope Ethiopia. So if you have more as well, please get in touch with a staff member on our Discord. Shoot us a link, shoot us a short description. We'd love to get those added. So if you can't give a lot to these organizations, give a little. If you can't give anything at all, that's perfectly okay. Help us grow this community. Help us grow this channel. The more people that are here, the larger of an impact we will have overall. And we want to be able to put fundraisers on every single stream that we do directly. We're never doing super chats, and we're never going to push merchandising because we want everything to be charity oriented on this channel and while we're delivering this news. So please be sure to help us grow this channel. Like, subscribe, let your friends know about us. You know, you can follow our social media. You can, give your friends and your Discord communities and whatever else you're a part of, let them know about us, and that helps us out a ton. So thank you very much. So far, I think we're sitting at 189 subscribers, which blows my mind, by the way. Thank you so much. I never thought we'd even get to this point. So this has been amazing, and I can't wait to see where it goes from here. But as we get ready to roll into the news here, please be sure to ask questions. So I have some expertise in some of what a lot of the news tends to be. There's a lot of conflict and war and stuff. I was a Marine, I am a Marine technically. There is no former Marine, but I served in the Marine Corps between 2016 and 2020. I did 2 tours. My first one was to Syria, where I spent 4.5 months, and Kuwait, where I spent 1.5 months. And my second tour, I was one of the 100 Marines to respond to the Baghdad embassy compound, where I oversaw anti-armor operations for the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad during the protests in 2019-2020. And I also went to Saudi Arabia, and I trained Saudi Arabian Marines as well as worked with the Crisis Response Force out of Kuwait. So I am an O352 anti-tank missileman, where that means I operate specifically the M41A7 Sabre system, which is the tow missile launcher, as well as the M98A2 Clue, and of course that is the Javelin system. So please be sure to ask questions. My specialties lie in anti-armor warfare and armored doctrine, but I'm also fully cross-trained as a machine gunner, and being an infantryman, of course, I'm trained as a rifleman. So I'd be more than happy to try and answer those questions that you may have throughout the stream. A lot of this stuff is very complicated. Not a lot of stuff is going to make sense unless you understand why certain things are happening for certain reasons, why someone would do, a certain strike, or what the potential is there. And I'd be more than happy to answer them. If anything is outside my area of expertise, I will try to answer it to the best of my ability with my understanding of the situation, but I will say please do your own research and don't believe everything that somebody on the internet tells you. And with that, we're going to go ahead and dive right into Ukraine, and we're going to get into this special report because, boy, is there a lot of stuff to cover. And the first thing is actually something I wanted to start the night off on, and that is because misinformation is a big, big problem. So misinformation about this war, you have to understand that both Ukraine and Russia are in a war of information. They are trying to garner a narrative of support. Russia is trying to basically demonize the Ukraine and calling them Nazis, calling them fascists, calling them, saying that they were committing genocide against people within their own country. Saying a lot of rhetoric. They're pushing on Western allies. They're trying to garner support, and this isn't directed towards you or I, even though some people do apparently seem to want to back that support regardless. That's actually directed more towards Eastern countries that would already have more favorable ties, or even more so, anti-Western kind of mentalities there, such as China, which would be a huge ally for the Russian Federation. We've even seen them kind of come around there. But this disinformation is meant to do one of two things: either it garners or creates a narrative that's beneficial for that party. Please understand that Ukraine is participating in this too. It's just that Russia is a lot easier to identify. But you're either building a narrative to gain support, or you're trying to undercut the narrative of somebody else. What we see here is one of the few examples I have of the undercutting somebody else's narrative, and that is because at first glance this is a wedding party, and it seems that they are holding a Ukrainian flag and hailing, the Sieg Heil salutes from the Nazi Party. But with a bit of research, it turns out this is actually an edited photo, and it's actually a Russian imperialist flag in front of a statue of Lenin, and they are the ones actually hailing. So just take a look at this. It's very interesting to see this once again. So here is the doctored photo, and you can kind of tell. So first of all, the blue on the Ukrainian flag is not that deep. I have one. I can show you. Yeah, 1 second. So, first of all, the blue on the Ukrainian flag is not that deep to start off with. That's one way you can tell that this is an edited photo. Secondly, it's very hard to tell, but you aren't able to see, you're not really able to see anything behind that. So not only is there a color variation in there that doesn't make sense, but it also, something just kind of seems off. If you take a look at the video, the graininess of that photo, this doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. So that's kind of what we see, and I'm trying to fold this as respectfully as possible. I looked up the flag laws for Ukraine, and it turns out that there's not really a whole lot of them. They just say fold up basically their flag laws in Ukraine say fold up the flag in a way that keeps it well protected when not in use. It's not like the United States, but there's actually a flag code, which is really interesting, to me at least. I'm sure there may be after a certain point, but that is believe it or not, that is the actual Ukrainian flag. So you can see that this one's almost completely purple. Like, I have one sitting next to me if I ever need to show it again. But that's a thing. And so how can you tell? Well, that's because it's actually been lightened. So thanks to NAFO, which has made the news quite often. In fact, so the Minister of Defense of Ukraine actually had for a while a NAFO profile picture. This is the original picture. They actually ended up finding it. It's a wedding photo. And they're in front of the statue of Lenin in Novokuznetsk in Russia. Yeah. William Chocolate says, are they getting paid by the Russian government? I don't know. I don't think so. First of all, by the way, using an imperialist photo or using an imperialist flag in front of a statue of Lenin makes no sense, because Lenin and moreover the Mensheviks overthrew the imperial government, and then Lenin overthrew the Mensheviks, which is the Bolshevik revolutions. Technically, the Red Revolution's 2 revolutions, but the Mensheviks overthrow the imperialists, which is the Tsars, Tsaristas, and all of that fun stuff. And then you have the Mensheviks, which are kind of like more liberal. They're kind of like, they're not quite Bolshevik communism is a very small like sect of communism. It's a very small group of communism. Now, I don't agree with communism. I think it's great on paper. I don't think it's great in practice. And that shows quite heavily. It's very easy to. It's kind of like Baathism, which is great on paper. It's Baathism is Arab Enlightenment, but communism is kind of follows that rule, and it allows for an easy takeover of the government and to allow for dictatorships to easily form and rise in authoritarianism. So, yeah, the Mensheviks were more moderate. Thank you, William Chocolate, who's in the chat here, who allowed me, who's given me that word. Yes, they're very much more moderate. Bolsheviks are much more extreme. And so holding the imperialist flag, Sieg Heiling, okay, in front of Lenin, the irony is lost on me that none of these things should occur in the exact same photo. Lenin quite literally killed the imperialists on a large scale. He purged them pretty hard. And then, so that imperialist flag just doesn't make sense in front of Lenin. It would be a communist flag because Lenin hated the imperialists. And then, Sieg Heiling, the Russians, especially communist Russians, and the Russians in the imperialist army, considering they had to fight the Russians in World War I prior to them, like, surrendering under the Mensheviks, hate the Germans. I don't understand. Like, this photo doesn't make sense. But it makes sense because the imperialist photo and the imperialist flag and imperialist symbols are kind of a sign of fascism and white supremacy within Russia. Anyway, moving on to some more serious stuff out of here. And so that is misinformation. You're going to see a lot of this. Ukraine engages in this too. So things like in my opinion, right, and when I'm looking through this, I do not give major casualty updates whatsoever. Not even from Orisk, which even they have visual evidence of this throughout the entirety of the war. It's because of stuff like that. Where people are doctoring photos and what have you, that I don't go off of casualty numbers whatsoever. The truth of the matter is we're not going to know casualty numbers at the end of the war. Ukraine pushes it out every single day. Their Ministry of Defense releases casualty numbers. The Kiev Independent, which is the one you've probably seen if you have been tracking casualties throughout this war, is just reposting that in a new format. And we follow both, so I can tell you that. And then you do it about an hour later. But these numbers are, I believe, are highly inflated. Just like Russia they're deflating their numbers. Ukraine is inflating their casualty counts for Russian troops. Otherwise, if you go off of the casualty numbers of the Russian forces in this war, the war would be over by now. But it would have been over months ago, and that just simply is not the case. We continue on here. Child casualty update. Quote, since the beginning of Russia's full-scale war against Ukraine, 382 Ukrainian children have died. 740 children have been injured. Most of the victims among children are from the Donetsk region. And that comes from the Prosecutor General's Office of Ukraine. Once again, we get that daily child casualty update. Child casualties are especially horrendous. Children have no part in a war. We see things in Africa and we see conflicts in Africa, especially where child soldiers are pretty big, are a pretty big thing, and it's it's especially horrendous when you're talking about the usage of child soldiers. It is especially horrendous when you're talking about child casualties in a war. It's not something uncommon. It's just it's hard to kind of wrap your head around a child being killed, especially in a war zone. How that happens, like what circumstances bring that about. Reasonably, doing it for good reason is few and far between. And I had to have a very difficult time living with myself to do something like that. I don't understand how people can sleep at night with that. I had a near experience with that in Syria, where we had a little girl. She was rushing towards our post. She got past the line of deconfliction. She was too close for us to start using flares, so we started sighting in on her. She is unseasonably warm, and she was wearing this really heavy, brand new pink jacket. And it wasn't very long before this that we were told, like, yeah, the Islamic State will use children, and they would use people with mental disabilities, and they would tell them to run at a post, American post, when they'd have an S vest underneath them, suicide vest, and they would remotely detonate it on that individual. And you had to do something about it to save yourself, because they're not going to know any better, but you do. And that was something that we had just recently been told. So we sighted in on this child, and likely it wasn't. She got up to the fence line right in front of us. Neither of us decided to take the shot. And then she ran up to the fence post, and the only thing she said was she got up there and she went, "Hi!" And then she ran off. And we were sitting there cussing ourselves like, damn, we were really about to do that. And I have no idea how someone lives with themselves having actually done that. That is insane. That kind of a situation allows. And it happened 740 times for them to just be injured with another 382 deaths. So that's blows my mind. And within the Donetsk region, the reason for the majority of these casualties is because a lot of the civilian population didn't flee. They didn't flee in the numbers. The Donetsk region, the Luhansk region, has seen war so much over the last 8 years between the fighting between Ukrainian forces and the separatists. A lot of them just didn't evacuate. They thought they had seen it all. And even though the Ukrainian government said, no, you don't understand. You need to leave. This is nothing like the last 8 years. They still, it's really hard to say, it's really hard to leave everything behind, and say, this is where my great-grandfather lived, and they survived the Nazi occupation. This is where my grandfather lived, and he survived the Holodomor. And this is where my parents grew up, and they survived the Soviet Union, and this is where I have grown up. It's really hard to quantify that and have gone through all of these situations that everything be just fine, and now people aren't leaving. And it is much worse. War has evolved. It is deadlier. It's much more efficient. And a lot of casualties as a result. And by the time a lot of people are starting to evacuate, it's too little too late. And I don't blame anybody for those decisions. I understand in a lot of ways why that would be. It is very hard. But unfortunately, it has led to a lot of deaths. The war on culture also continues here. Quote, since the beginning of Russia's full-scale war against Ukraine, Russian aggressors have destroyed and damaged 500 cultural objects in Ukraine. That's coming from Alexander Chachenko, who is the Minister of Culture and Information Policy within Ukraine. That allows us to move over here into the Kharkiv Oblast. Kharkiv was hit with more missiles. We do not know the extent of the damage or casualties, but we do have video evidence to prove that the city was once again hit by missiles. Kharkiv has to be struck by Iskander-M ballistic missile systems fired from the Belgorod Oblast, usually in and around the city of Belgorod itself, as well as converted S-300 and S-400 anti-air missile batteries that had their missiles converted to hit surface targets. They're very highly inaccurate, considering it wasn't their design purpose, and as such, we continue to see civilian casualties on quite a large scale. Kharkiv has no tactical or strategic importance for the Russians, or at least viability for the Russians in this part of the war. They simply have lost the initiative within this area and no longer hold enough concentrated troops to make any kind of a push. In fact, they are so far out from Kharkiv that not even their standard artillery will actually hit the city itself. Their only options are to hit it with ballistic missiles. And so we continue to see it pounded for no other reason than to terrorize the civilian population at this point. Just take a look.
Синуль, ти де? Бігом, бігом! Під этим, пожалуйста, йди сюди, я тебе прошу. Давай, давай.
Scythe, we can stop right there. And please, I implore you to continue watching this. Because I hope to change your mind. Over here in Chuhiv, this is coming from Oleh Subinov, who's the head of the Kharkiv Regional Military Administration. Quote, rugged attacks on the Chuhiv and Izium districts in the Kharkiv region on September 3rd. One woman was killed, a man and a woman were injured. Local private houses and outbuildings were damaged. Chuhiv continues to get shelled pretty frequently throughout this war. Pretty heavy shelling, in fact. Over here in occupied part of the Kharkiv Oblast, this is in the city of Balaklia. Balaklia received a large detonation. It appears that an ammunition depot was struck by Ukrainian forces and completely detonated this area. It's quite an extensive blast. It's pretty impressive. Just take a look. I mean, just look at that. That is a huge blast. Reportedly, it was M777 artillery fire that actually brought this down, and likely probably an Excalibur round, as that is the most accurate artillery piece or artillery round that can be brought to bear through the M777. It's a jet-assisted guided munition. You can see that blast cloud rising up in the air there. But once again, ammunition depot appears to have been destroyed here in Balaklia, which is in the Kharkiv Oblast, north of Izium. As we begin to move down here, we start getting into the Donbass. The Donbass is really the meat and potatoes of the war. This is where the majority of the fighting is taking place. And it seems to have been the fact that the Russian forces have not only stalled, but they're weakened to the point that there are some areas in which Ukraine can conduct counterattacks. You take a look over here. This is the small little city of Ozern, which is just across the Seversky Donets River. The Seversky Donets River really acts as the deconfliction line. Russian forces remain on one side, Ukrainian forces on the other. The reason being, as pontooning across the Seversky Donets is very difficult. One, while it is important in order to continue an offensive on the ground, pontooning across this creates a choke point that's easily exploited by Ukrainian troops, and it's also easily targeted by Ukrainian artillery, and it usually has led so far to high casualties across the Seversky Donets. What we see here is Ukrainian forces have actually decided that now is the time. They pushed across the Seversky Donets River, and they officially took the city of Ozern, which has been declared liberated. Take a look.
Любі друзі, шановні наші захисники, патріоти, громадяни, батальйон Національної гвардії Стрілецький, військова частина 335 спільно з батальйоном 63-м 103-ї бригади територіальної оборони, де окупував місто, населений пункт Озерне Донецької області, чим самим доказав Росгвардії, куди їм потрібно йти і за яким кораблем. Звільняємо нашу землю клаптик за клаптиком, село за селом. За нами перемога. Слава Україні! Героям слава!
You can actually see here them crossing the river. We actually have a video of them crossing the river here. They're taking some boats there, right there across the Seversky Donets over onto Ozern. This is probably right after the city had been declared liberated and Russian forces had pushed back. They kind of have this relaxed posture here.
Не ругайся, Юнач. Надежда, передай привіт.
Назад приємніше
Родині, мамі.
переправлятись. Назад легше переправляти, ніж на штурм, так?
Всегда говорят.
Знову річка, знову чужий населений пункт, і знову ми повертаємось без втрат. Живі та здорові.
З успішним виконанням. Не ругайся.
So pretty cool to see. Pretty cool to see both ends of that. But as we kind of move along here, we move over to Lysychansk, where Lysychansk has also gotten very little to no help. Lysychansk was pretty much completely demolished during the fighting that took place there. Russian forces used artillery rather heavily within Lysychansk and Severodonetsk, where they used BM-21 Grad systems to end up leveling entire city blocks. And Lysychansk has been cut off. There is no, much like Mariupol and other locations, other large areas that have been captured by Russian forces, there's no running water, there's no gas, there's no electricity, there's no nothing, and there's very little aid. Your businesses have been destroyed, and a lot of things have been pillaged and taken. So there's very little to no help getting here. You can just take a look. This is the bread line here in Lysychansk, just to get yourself something a little bit to eat to take home to whatever family you have left.
Это очередь за хлебом с утра. Это очередь за хлебом с утра.
Once again, very little to no help. Jump over here. This is the daily Donetsk update, which comes from Pavlo Krylenko, the head of the Donetsk Regional Military Administration. They say, quote, Russian aggressors fired missiles at the Donetsk region on September the 3rd. 4 people were killed and 2 citizens were injured. And we do actually have that from his Twitter as well. As we continue down here, we're seeing right outside of Pisky, where fierce fighting has continued. This is actually a Russian, it would appear, BMP or BMD, which ends up having a sympathetic detonation, catastrophic kill for Ukrainian forces. The issue is that in these areas, which the fighting has been ongoing for the past 8, almost 9 years now, Russian forces are really having difficulty trying to puncture through even the Ukrainian lines just outside of one of their largest key cities, which is the city of Donetsk itself. So just take a look. Unfortunately, that does have some copyright music, but this is a Russian, would appear BMP or BMD, which has been struck with an ATGM. You can see it sympathetically detonating there. That's the ammunition cooking off. Okay. When they see Chechen troops running away from the front. Okay. Okay. Saif, you're a very interesting individual. I'm really curious as to what you have to say here. What's this about Chechen troops? Chechen troops. Oh, okay. So, first of all, they're Kadarovites, not Chechens. Because considering you speak English or you really know how to use Google Translate, I'm going to give you a brief history of Chechnya here for you. First of all, Chechnya was utterly destroyed during the First and Second Chechen Wars in the 90s. I don't know if you're tracking that or not. But Chechnya, specifically this Battle of Grozny, the First and Second Battle of Grozny, was completely leveled. Chechen forces are Kadarovites. They're called Kadarovites because of the leader Kadyrov. A Kadarovite is someone who follows Kadyrov. Kadyrov was actually a Chechen rebel. Chechnya is one of only 2 provinces not to sign the Federation Pact of the Russian Federation following the end and the collapse of the Soviet Union in the late 90s. That began the First and the Second Chechen Wars. The First Chechen Wars kicked off, and guess what? Kadyrov was actually a member of the Chechen army. After the first Battle of Grozny, he ended up switching sides, taking place and then for the Second Battle of Grozny and during the Second Chechen War, fought on the side of the Russian Federation. Guess what? The Russian Federation, after completely leveling Chechnya, ended up taking over the area. So, no, the Chechen troops, yes, the Chechen troops are very feared. If you've ever seen fighting from the First and the Second Chechen War, the Chechens themselves, the Chechens are extremely fearsome. Think the United States fighting against the Taliban. you know, while they may have been lacking in numbers compared to the Russian army, they certainly made up for it in their tactics. And guess what? The Chechens lost because they got that's what happens when you bomb an entire area into submission. That's what happens when you bomb an area long enough. So that is what occurred. So Kadyrov, being the leader of those that are the Chechens that were fighting on the side of the Russian Federation, after switching sides because he was originally against the Russian Federation, then he ends up coming into power, which is why his followers are known as Kadyrovites, not Chechens. The Chechens would kill Kadyrov and the Russians given the chance, which we've seen in Ukraine with Chechen forces fighting on the Ukrainian side against the Russians. There's no Ukrainian who gives a damn about Chechen troops because they're not facing Chechen troops. They're facing Kadyrovites. And Kadyrovites, as we have seen, cannot fight for shit. They suck terribly. We've seen the entire formations. Kharkiv. Kharkiv's the perfect example. Guess what? You know who's holding Kharkiv's line? The Kadyrovites. You know how well that worked out? They can't shoot at Kharkiv anymore with anything but ballistic missiles. They suck ass. They can't fight. They never have been able to fight. The only reason they won is because of Russian complete air superiority over Chechnya. And then the only reason they fought, they're TikTok warriors. I mean, they're there for a propaganda campaign to say that the Chechens are there. They don't do anything. Anytime they actually fight against anyone, they get massacred in the thousands. And they fight streetlights in Mariupol. And then the Ukrainians started shooting at them, and guess what? They ran. They ran. So, Scythe, the Ukrainian army. So, talking about the Ukrainian army, or that video that I just showed you regarding that BMD blowing up, the Ukrainian army when they see Chechen troops running away from the front. That's because that's not true whatsoever. That would be actually the Kadyrovites blowing up right there, and that's because that the Chechens are fighting on the side of Ukraine. Just based off of historical precedent. You don't fight a war twice and suddenly love the person that took you over. It's not how it works. Anyway, as we continue here. Flechette munitions are being used here at the front lines. Russian forces have been noted using flechette munitions. A flechette munition, think of it as taking an artillery gun and laying down the barrel so it's shooting straight at a target, and then loading it with a giant shotgun shell filled with nails. And that is a flechette round. Take a look at this. So we have a couple of photos here. So this is a flechette round. This is a Russian 152 millimeter flechette round. They also use them for tanks, which would be about 120 millimeter rounds. But they're basically like little nails. They're much more aerodynamic, of course. But it's the same process. You take a nail head, you bow it out, so that way it flies through the air, kind of like an arrow, and it ends up impacting somebody. It's anti-personnel targets. But these are some types of munitions that the Russians are using, and they're air bursting them, as you can see here. So, as you can take a look here, this is flechette munitions. They come out in giant chunks here, usually when they're actually maintained. It is medieval. That's what flechette comes from. Rooster Cyberman says it looks medieval. Yeah, flechette is medieval, actually. It's a medieval terminology. But they're effective. They're effective anti-personnel. They're effective anti-personnel weapons. In fact, even the United States maintains flechette rounds. But you're not really supposed to use them airburst. for obvious reasons. Once again, limiting civilian casualties, collateral damage, kind of under the first protocol of the Geneva Convention, and just the Geneva Conventions, and also just having some kind of morals. Anyway, moving down here. William Chocolate says, I mean, it could be a sign that they are struggling to find actual shells for their howitzers. You know, maybe, but probably not. Russia has stupid stockpiles of artillery rounds. And that's what happens when the Cold War happens. In fact, when the Soviet Union broke up, Russia went back through their stockpiles. They still have artillery. They still had artillery rounds stockpiled in their arsenal from before the Soviet Union was a thing. They still had imperial. They didn't even have the artillery guns to fire them, but they had things from like 1918, 1916. They still had that in their arsenal when they collapsed in 1991. So and that's not including the giant arms race where the 152 millimeter main gun, you know, for artillery has been a staple of the Russian military for decades. It's definitely not a new design. 120 millimeter main guns definitely aren't anything new either. The T-54 had an 120 millimeter main gun as well. Yeah, Xenocide says don't matter how many rounds they got if they can't get them to their guns. Yeah, that's really the point there. How much of their stockpiles were sold to other countries, though? That's coming from Rooster Sideburns. It wouldn't matter. It really wouldn't. Russia maintained a large majority of the stockpiles, seeing as Russia kept everything best for itself. And then Soviet countries had minor stockpiles. So that's really kind of how that worked out. They only had minor stockpiles to be able to hold the line, while Mother Russia maintained most of their stockpiles because really the Soviet bloc was built to prevent an Operation Barbarossa happening again, to create a buffer zone between Russia and everyone else. The point of NATO is so that everyone can be equally protected. The point of the Soviet bloc was to slow any invasion of Russia. These countries, when they were taken over, guess what? Yeah, that's to prevent these guys from pushing all the way into Russia, kind of like how Germany took over Poland and immediately pushed into Russia. Your point was to buy them time with blood. That was the point of the Soviet bloc. Jump down to Mariupol. Mariupol has a couple of different updates here. The pregnant woman in the photographs from the Mariupol maternity hospital blast, she is now being used for propaganda, in fact. She was taken to the city of Donetsk from the besieged city of Mariupol. So everyone should remember this photo from the Battle of Mariupol. Yep, that's her now. She's doing just fine. And she has been posting a lot of pro-Russian stuff, as you can see. Not entirely sure how forced this is or how willing this is. Considering that she's in occupied territory, it could be either way. But this is a thing. Very frustrating, considering that she almost just was annihilated. And then she probably would have been picked up by a bucket if it was a direct hit. As Russia continues to try to cover up its atrocities here in Mariupol, more and more bodies are just found every single day. Remember, I've talked about quite extensively the city of Mariupol is a city of death. Mariupol is 90% completely destroyed by the Russian Federation. 90% of the city, if it hasn't collapsed on its own, it will have to be demolished and completely rebuilt. Mariupol has no running water, has no gas, has no electricity, has no housing, has no nothing. The city is just completely destroyed, and it still has to be dug out. It still has to be cleared in a lot of areas. Most of the city has to still be cleared. And there are people buried in every single house and building. They are buried under the rubble. Just every single one of them. And because they didn't have any running water, a lot of residents in Mariupol were having to pull water from shell craters. And the bodies in the rubble are decomposing. And that's running into this water. So there's a huge cholera outbreak. There's no sanitation. There's a huge cholera outbreak. What foods and supplies they get there, they have to do absolutely backbreaking work for. The Russians are really just barely keeping the civilians in Mariupol alive to have a workforce, because they know they can't clear it themselves. They are barely keeping people alive. And to have died in Mariupol was the merciful thing. Because to have survived and lived through this absolute hellhole is unfathomable. And even to this day, I mean, they're still finding what's left of people inside these buildings. I mean, just take a look. This is coming from Andrew Petroshenko. Who is the advisor to the head of he's the advisor to the mayor of Mariupol. I mean, just everywhere. And just think, that's just one room in one apartment building. And all of these apartment buildings were just bombed. Like, it's hell. You think, I mean, it's just hell. That's all this is. It's just, there's no way to describe it. Like, there is no, like, talk about the 7 layers of hell. This is a new layer. Like, this just no, I can't fathom how these people continue to go on living. I cannot. I couldn't do it. I cannot believe that people live in these kind of conditions. And Fair says the excavation and identifications of victims will take years alone. Yeah, I mean, no one will know, probably for some good time, years if not decades, the death toll from this war, if we ever know. I mean, it's just horrendous. So jump up here in a little bit lighter news, and our Russian Mi-28 Havoc gunship was downed by Ukrainian air defenses today. These are very rare and they're very valuable, at about $18 million an equivalent USD a piece. These Russian gunships were originally intended to replace the Mi-24 Hind, but they never reached a comparable number of airframes to really be viable replacements. Simply just don't have the numbers. Once again, a Russian Mi-28 Havoc helicopter shot down just outside of Mariupol. Over here, we see that a Russian Psylocke-1 counter-UAV system was actually captured by Ukrainian forces today, somewhere here in the Donbass. This really degrades the Russian Federation. They do not have very extensive amounts of anti-UAV equipment. They just don't have a lot of counter-UAV stuff. They do not have a lot of electronic warfare stuff here, and keep in mind, UAVs are highly used on both sides. The Ukrainians use them all the time. Having something like this is very important for Russian forces. Daily attacks. Daily attacks by Ukrainian forces using UAVs and drones. And to lose something like this is to completely lose out on a capability that is going to, for the Russians, save a lot of lives. But it's very good. This was been captured by Ukrainian forces. And you can see a series of photos here of this system. So if you go on Discord, it says that Europe rebuilt a lot of cities pretty quickly after being leveled in World War II. They did, but that, once again, was the Marshall Plan, which pretty much saw, okay, we can stop fighting war now, so now let's completely take this giant industrial might that everyone has built up for their war efforts, and now let's rebuild a country, and let's rebuild some countries. And that's the level it will take to rebuild Ukraine. 100%. This country is wrecked. Its economy has been wrecked. It's lost. It will have lost an entire, large part of a generation of people. And just because they fled doesn't mean that they will return. Some people will settle down in other places in Europe. And that's saying that the war ends quickly. This war could become a very long and protracted conflict. Outside of Silenikove, we see that, which is up here in the Dnipro Vysokopillya, we see that Russian Orlan 10 has been successfully shot down by Ukrainian forces. So there you go, another Orlan 10 down. Always glad to see that. And that starts to bring us over here as we move our way over to Kherson. This is all over in Kryvyi Rih. And we see that, quote, on September 4th, Ukrainian Air Defense Forces shot down a Russian missile near Kryvyi Rih and the Dnipro region. That's coming from the press service of the Air Command East. And finally, that brings us into the big thing of the last about week now, and the big news of the night, which is here in the Kherson Oblast. And man, has there been a lot of developments in the Kherson area. Wow. A ton of different developments. First of all, this is Olhain. I'm sorry if I can't pronounce these things properly. I'm an American that's kind of ignorant on a lot of stuff, so please forgive me for my pronunciations. And this is Olhain, which is reportedly to have been liberated by Ukrainian forces early today as part of Ukraine's successes from this counteroffensive. It was declared liberated, as well as the big one of the night. This is Vysokopillya. Vysokopillya was almost completely encircled by Ukrainian forces, and Russian telegram channels have been officially stating that, or have even admitted, as well as the Ukrainians have officially stated, that they have liberated the entirety of Vysokopillya. In fact, they raised the Ukrainian flag over the city's hospital, which is located right there. So, pretty awesome to see. And they are capturing a ton of equipment while they're here. The Russians quite literally broke.
Пришлось забрать.
Наш трофей забрали БМД-2.
Кстати, друга уже. Героям сала, хохлам залюб. Ой, вибачайте.
Слава ЗСУ!
Слава ЗСУ, українцям сала, а кацапам хуя.
Now, is this not a photo to behold? This is a photo that, much like, these are photos. These kind of photos like this. This is a Joe Rosenthal-esque photo, if I ever seen one. For those that don't know, Joe Rosenthal took the photo of the second flag raising at the Battle of Iwo Jima. And this is kind of one of those things that really harkens back to that kind of a feeling. So very few people know this. but let's see if I can bring it up here for you guys. Yep, there it is. So that is the photo I'm talking about. This photo is taken in February of 1945 by Joe Rosenthal. This photo is the photo of the Battle of Iwo Jima. And this U.S. Marines. This is H Company of the, I want to say it's the 5th Marine Division here at the summit of Iwo Jima. This is actually the second flag raising. The first flag raising had occurred several hours earlier. Out of this photo, at least 3 of the Marines were killed in action on the Battle of Iwo Jima, during the Battle of Iwo Jima. That's because this is only day 5, I believe, of a 36-day campaign on the island. So a very tough battle. Very, very tough battle. It's one of the bloodiest battles in Marine Corps history. It's actually the only, I believe it's the only battle of World War II where the Marines actually took more casualties than the Japanese did during the course of the battle. And then you take a look at this kind of a photo as well. And you can start to see this garners very similar feelings. This garners that, in the words of the Secretary of the Navy, who was on board the ship and watched the flag go up at the Battle of Iwo Jima, this means a Marine Corps for another 500 years. And this kind of a photo means a Ukraine for another 500 years, is what that means. These photos have such an impact. The battle was hard fought. And while there is a lot longer time to go, there's a lot more bloodshed. There's a lot more death and destruction and suffering that many people are going to have to go through. Civilians, Ukrainian troops, Russian families at home. There's a lot of suffering that will have to be endured. This photo, much like Joe Rosenthal's, taken on just day 5 of the Battle of Iwo Jima, means Ukraine for another 500 years. That is what that means. Here we can see this is coming out of Vysokopillya, and this is the BTR-D Airborne Armored Personnel Carrier. Technically it's a BMD, but it's okay.
Кацапскую хуйню ебать нахуй. Намутили, блядь. Ну шо, пидорасы, блядь. Тепер будем вас нею і мочить, нахуй, блядь, тварі, блядь. Ха-ха-ха.
So that's pretty amazing to see. And that allows us to continue on down here. Max says we need a Normandy landing type in Crimea. First of all, that will never happen again, probably. And secondly, no, we do not. Ukraine does not need to take 10,000 losses in a single day. And amphibious landings are considered the most desperate of any military operation. That is a terrible, terrible idea. Sorry, amphibious landings against a defended beachhead is the most desperate battles, or is the most desperate type of offensive that you can launch in any kind of capacity. That's saying a lot, considering military operations in urban terrain plan for a minimum of 80% casualties. More successful strikes happened yesterday. Of course, we get the update 24 hours after the fact for operational security purposes. Quote, the armed forces of Ukraine destroyed a Russian 152mm self-propelled howitzer, 2A-65 Mista B, a 155mm gun howitzer, and an S-300 anti-air anti-aircraft missile system, or SAM, an enemy ammunition depot in the Bashtansky region, and a ferry crossing near the city of Berislav in the south of Ukraine on September the 3rd. Once again, coming from Operational Command South. We jump up here, and we see that YPR 765s appear to have been destroyed. Several of them, these are armored personnel carriers donated by, I believe, the United Kingdom. As seen in these, we're seeing in videos at the open. So these armored personnel carriers were some of those. We actually showed them here on the channel. Is that these were used quite heavily to support infantry as they were pushing forward. Appears some of them have been destroyed, and the fighting up here in Kherson is some of the most kinetic and bloody of the entire war. This is some very bitter fighting across a very long front. It's not concentrated in one area, just like the battle of Mariupol or the Battle of Lysychansk and Severodonetsk. It is extremely bloody, bitter, highly kinetic fighting across this entire front line, from tip to tip of the Dnipro River. It is constant, kinetic, bloody, bitter, up-close and personal fighting between both sides. It's some of the most bloody and kinetic of this entire war, and it really, really shows what modern warfare is expected to be like. And that's kind of what we're seeing here. As casualties pretty heavily on both sides. Once again, these were in support of Ukrainian ground troops on the opening days of the opening day of the offensive. As you can see here, these have been damaged and or destroyed. That one was detracked. This one appears to have been completely destroyed. It's missing road wheels, especially. They are completely out of action. So Ukraine is taking losses. They're taking quite significant losses. It's not something that's going to be talked about very heavily. It should be addressed, but this is very bloody for them. But it's also very important. Taking this area does so much for the war on a strategic scale. You don't need to garrison a lot of troops here. You've cut off the Dnipro River. It's too fast moving to really pontoon across. You can't launch major offensives by ferrying across. You have the bridges destroyed. Leave them destroyed. It traps the Russians on the south side of the Dnipro River, and there's nothing they can do but harass you. You don't have to put a lot of troops in order to protect that line. And that frees up all of these Ukrainian troops that have been fighting here for months. And you can now send them to the Donbass and the southern front and Zaporizhia. And you can break through to Mariupol. You can break through to Donetsk. You can break through and retake, Kharkiv. You could finish off the Kharkiv campaign. It does so much. You could literally fold in Russian lines by finishing up the battle here. And I think that's kind of what the Ukrainians may be going for. Their objectives are reportedly rather limited right now. But they're going to take some heavy losses, but you have to, a lot of blood is going to have to be spilt in this war regardless, and this seems to be the best way to, finish this in as quickly of a way as possible, so that way you're not dragging this out. It's a war of attrition. It's a meat grinder. There's no other way around it. It has to be fought the way it's being fought now. But they are taking heavy casualties on both sides, and with these tough battles, it does bring sweet victories, as there has been quite a lot of successes today. What we've seen is that despite the amount of casualties that the Ukrainians have been taking over the course of this offensive over the last week, of course, we have the liberations of those villages in the north. We know there are other successes as well. And what we're seeing is that large groups of Russian troops are surrendering. Russian forces they are leaving their positions, and they're doing it in post-haste. They're quite literally leaving as quickly as possible. They're leaving equipment behind. They are surrendering in large groups, but the fighting is still very bitter and very bloody throughout the entire front still. And we're going to probably see that for some time. Mountains of destroyed vehicles are just littering the roadways and the fields throughout the entire Kherson Oblast as we take a look here. You have Russian prisoners of war here. Just freshly captured. At least 4 of them here. So that's a full fire team. It's been captured. Even more of them. You know, fire, it looks like a fire team plus. Oh, yep. You're counting at least 6 in that hole. So that's a fire team plus captured. Got a whole other group of those that were surrendered earlier today here. I mean, they're really surrendering today. We saw a lot of surrenders all day today. I think I already got this one, right? Yep. Says, I wish that Russia would include from the inside rather than to see its decisive and bloody battles. Yeah, I would too, JL. Let's see. Hope Russia is losing more. Looks like the battle is a long open field. Surely that's an advantage. No. It's not really an advantage or a disadvantage, but as we can see here, here's a Ukrainian M777 battery opening fire. It's not really an advantage or disadvantage to be fighting over open fields, because just like the Russians are fighting open fields, the Ukrainians are too. And the Ukrainians are on the offensive. The Russians have a defense in depth that we've seen. They have think of it like several different rings. Hold on. I thought surrendering troops was propaganda. Not when you're seeing them surrender in this large of numbers. You're seeing them surrender quite a lot. It is a propaganda boost, but just like Joe Rosenthal's photo in 1945 sold more war bonds than any other war bond drive of the war. And John Basilone went home to sell war bonds, which is saying something. Let's see here. Target engagement. Fundamentals and anti-armor warfare. Page 137. Okay. Sorry, I'm looking at defensive tactics and all of that wonderful stuff. I'm trying to see if I can find where we talk about doing defense in depth. I don't know if it's going to be here. That's unfortunate. So, basically, defense in depth means that you engage, you have multiple lines of... Max, this is not classified material. Please don't get me raided by the FBI. None of this is classified. I can promise you that. All of this is either for official use only, which was given to me for official use, or... And none of that I'm showing you, or it's just basic unclassified, which is what this is. Prepare for firing, operator maintenance, vehicle mount, target engagement, and heavy anti-armor weapons, operators maintenance, anti-armor range card, anti-armor fighting positions. Method of engagement. This might be it. Mass surprise fire. Okay. Train evaluation, firing plan, saturation of the battlefield. There we go. There it is. Okay. So this is what we would call a defense in depth. A defense in depth is the main tactic of defending is the main tactic of setting up a defensive position. What it does is you use multiple lines of defense, and each of these is a trigger line. And what ends up seeing, what you end up seeing is that a lot of times this is supposed to be for different types of assets, and that's kind of what this is talking about. So this is a defense in depth, and it's basically multiple concentric rings that you're supposed to make around your main defensive position. And the furthest one, saying you have armored forces coming towards you. The furthest one is artillery and naval gunfire. So you would hit them with artillery and naval gunfire, and as they come in, you would hit them with tow systems, wire guided munitions, long range heavy anti-armor weaponry, and their artillery. Then within certain range, you would hit them with tanks, tow missiles, and artillery. And then you hit them with javelins, tanks, artillery, naval gunfire, mortars. And then you would also bring in light anti-armor weapons, so your AT-4s, Carl Gustavs, Laws, RPG-7s, RPG-26s. That's where you start really engaging them at close range, and that's when you're within like 200 meters of the target, when they're within 200 meters of you. That is called a defense in depth. You saturate the battlefield with as much firepower as possible, and you're projecting that firepower as far away from you as possible. So as the enemy gets closer and closer and closer and closer and closer, they're taking more and more and more and more casualties. More and more and other casualties. So that's what you're seeing, or that's what we're seeing from the Russians, is that defense in depth. It's very effective. While the Russians are losing some of these positions and they're losing forces, they are also going and they're just moving back to other defensive positions that they already have set up, secondary, tertiary, quaternary positions. That they can set up and continue the fight on. They have this planned out. It's not just a hodgepodge of guys digging holes in the ground for no apparent reason. There's a plan. It's just not everyone sees that plan. As we continue here, we continue to see some of the heavy fighting ongoing.
Калібр 82 мм не найпотужніший в артилерії, але при точному влучанні ворогу буде непереливки.
Вчора працювали по коректировці піхоти, попали в БМП. Сьогодні розбили піхоту, яка нам зайшла, намагалася з наступного напрямку закріпитися на вигідні позиції для них, щоб йти на штурм.
Пішла!
Ще тих не встигли забрати з поля бою, ранених своїх і просотих. І вони вже йдуть новими хвилями, значить. Але ми тримаємося, боронимо, відступати ніхто не збирається, тільки будемо.
That's a very nonchalant way to drop mortar rounds, by the way. Did I miss one? I think I might have missed one. Let's see here. Yep, there you go. This is ZSU-23 TAC 4, Tunguska, which has been completely destroyed. That is an anti-aircraft platform. That's a quad-mounted 23mm anti-aircraft gun system. It's 23mm cannons. There's 4 of them all mounted together. But that thing's an older weapon system that probably shouldn't be used in warfare anymore, and it is. And the Russians are using it. Let's see. Oh. You see here, more captured Russian equipment. Once again, they're taking more and more stuff. They're leaving positions. You can see here, here's more captured Russian positions here in the Kherson Oblast. You can see they've been completely. I mean, you don't just leave your rifles and your rockets and your flip flops and your kit. Like, you don't just leave your vest and your pack and everything. If unless you're either A, planning to come back, or B, you are just on the ropes. Like, you are running because if you don't, you're dead. And that is kind of the situation that the Russians seem to be finding themselves in many places today. And once again, they're leaving these positions in post-haste. I mean, take a look at this. This is an ASG-30, which is a grenade launcher machine gun, kind of like the Mark 19. And that's for the Russians. And they're leaving even their gun positions in place. They're heavy guns, which are those are not, there's a lot of them for sure, but they're not that many per unit. I mean, you don't just leave gun gear like this laying behind. This is devastating if used correctly. And they just left it. I mean, take a look.
Есік нахуй, їхній. Ще, айда беху подивимося їхній. Кир, ми беху подивимося.
Тупо, ну?
Да.
Та ну нахуй.
Щось заряжено кинули, сука, петухи єбучі.
У нас собі взяв 4 магазини. Мені, в принципі, достаточно.
Трохи роз'їбали, конечно, тут. Ну, трохи. Ну і дохуя пизди получили, конечно. Да. Покидалися гандони до хуячого, блядь, бека єбануться просто. А ось це самий головний трофей. Оце самий головний трофейчик, їбать. Тра-та-та.
Добрий день, Євген.
Добрий день, малышка.
It's BMD2. Yeah. Like, they're just leaving. Like, like, getting out of Dodge as quickly as possible. And they're getting destroyed, too. I mean, they are taking heavy casualties along the entirety of this front lines. I mean, they're just abandoning everything behind them. Ukrainian pilots are still on the hunt. See here, SU-25s, Frogfoots, Mi-24s. We've seen a lot of videos of Ukrainian aircraft in the air today, operating at very low level, following these roadways as they're heading up to the front. This one's coming from what would appear the gunner's seat on an Mi-24 Hind, as you can see the silhouette there. But, I mean, low-level flights, once again, man, you see that's a MiG-29 Fulcrum. I'm not quite sure which one that one was. Might be an Su-30. Su-25 Frogfoots, close air support aircraft. I believe this one's another MiG-29. Yep, another MiG-29. I mean, it's just video after video of these things, heading towards the front lines. Look at this guy. I mean, this guy is stupid low. This is I believe this is an Mi-8 helicopter. He could have landed on that semi if you wanted to. They're just operating heavily today. I mean, stupid low. Rich Striper says, never thought Ukraine had Frogfoots. Ukraine has Frogfoots. They do. They have quite an extensive amount. We've seen a lot of Su-25 Frogfoots in the war. And these are all NATO designations, by the way. The Frogfoot, the Fulcrum, the Havoc, all of these are all like NATO designations for these aircraft. NATO likes to give things a name. It's easier to remember. Why are they flying that low? It's called Nap of the Earth flight. Nap of the Earth flight is done to prevent being shot down. It limits target opportunity. So think of it like peering through a window. I don't have a good example, but think of it like peering through a window. If someone runs past your window, you see the person running past your window, but if you're trying to hit them, right, then you have you're trying to shoot them, right? If someone runs past your window, you have a split second to see them, realize who it is, and then shoot them, right? And it's kind of like that, except you're talking about ducking in and out between traffic and trees and buildings and hills and everything else. It also, radar doesn't work best at that altitude. You can't see things. It's better. It's a lot easier to detect things at a higher altitude, and it gives manpads a very short time window to designate a target and shoot it down. So it's called nap of the earth flight. It's a protection thing, and it's also kind of a skill thing. Ukrainian pilots, I haven't seen any really mess it up too bad. I've seen some Ukrainian pilots, or some Russian pilots, sorry, screw this up and not work out so well. If you remember, there's some videos of some Ka-52s that are trying to show off to some people on the beach in one of the occupied areas, and the Ukrainian pilot or the Russian pilot couldn't keep the Ka-52 steady, and probably shouldn't be flying at nap of the earth flight. But yeah, those are just. Yeah, they're just another day for them. They're just continuing to fight there. They're just continuing to fly at low level, and they are operating very, very heavily right now. The Ukrainian Air Force has really had a complete turnaround since the beginning of the war. They were kind of on the back foot for the first few months of the war, and now we see them operating heavily at a very fast pace along the entirety of the front. They're doing a lot of work. They're putting in a lot of time and work to support the ground forces, and now is one of those key moments to do so. Unfortunately, it would appear that a TB2 Bayraktar was shot down by Russian forces here in the Kherson Oblast. TB2 Bayraktar is absolutely hated by the Russians. It's dreaded. And unfortunately, one was shot down by Russian air defenses today. They are feared because the TB2 Bayraktar drone annihilated Russian forces north of Kyiv during the beginning of the war. And so they haven't seen a lot of action since. They've seen some action, at least not a lot that we have seen. Not very public action, I should say. But one was shot down. Good news is Ukraine does maintain a pretty good fleet. These are a UAV, so nobody was injured or killed as a result. But we do have pretty good footage evidence that a TB2 Bayraktar was effectively shot down today here in the Kherson Oblast. Very unfortunate, but it's war and it happens. At least no one was killed. However, Bayraktars are still out and on the prowl in the Kherson Oblast, and we can see some of the successes that and its brothers did have out here. So Bayraktars, which once again proved vital early on in the war, once again back to reap Russian troops of their souls, as death from above continues to snatch its victims without warning throughout the Kherson Oblast. And so we get more ISR footage. We get to see in live action some of these strikes. Fantastic. That guy, yeah, these guys that were laying next to these vehicles, new pants required. New pants. I hope they were wearing brown pants. We can see today some of the effectiveness of some of this ISR footage. This is all for thermal imaging. You can see the outlines of some of these armored vehicles here that are producing a lot of heat. But we've seen quite a bit of ISR footage over the last few days, and it seems that the Bayraktars are very active once again, and they are definitely destroying quite a few targets out there here within the Kherson Oblast. The Antonovsky Bridge was destroyed up close and personal. Wait, how were they able to run away in time? They weren't, Erevis. So those guys... I'll go back to this video. So if you see these... So these are heat signatures. This is in black hot. Black hot infrared, technically. So you have two modes in thermal. You have white hot and black hot. Black hot, the heat signature pops up as a black color, and it's really good for daytime. White hot's really good for nighttime, and it's kind of situational dependent. But these guys, they're taking a look. You can see these guys up here. And you can see another small heat signature down here. But there's probably about a team to a squad of guys that are off on the left side of this vehicle. And as this TB2 Bayraktar is down or overseeing this, you can see it's targeting the vehicle. This thing blows up, and all of these guys they get up and they start running. These guys are ready to go, and you can see a couple more down there. The reason that these guys were able to run is because that explosions happen to go up and out, and it's also a lot of things to do with faith, or fate, I should say. Fate is a huge factor. These guys probably just got really, really lucky. As you can see, all these little hot bits of metal and shrapnel that landed all around these guys. That's what this stuff is. This is little bits of metal, superheated metal that just got heated up by that explosion that is just spewed all over the place. Yeah, they're not in the vehicle. They were outside of it. But that's just luck. A lot of this is just luck. War is just a lot of luck. It's a lot of luck. Because, who gets it, it's hard to explain, but it's weird. Sometimes, you see guys, they'll have bullets go right through their shirt collar, right through this little flappy part. Won't even touch them. And there are times the guys get nailed square in the chest. I mean, it's really hard to explain how things like that happen. Just a little bit of deviation. But anyway, the Antonovsky Bridge was struck once again. This time, we get some up close and personal footage with it, and we can take a look at some of this. They continue to strike. They continue to strike the Antonovsky Bridge to prevent any kind of resupply. This bridge is probably destined to collapse here at some point, but we get a lot of footage from today's strike. They are hitting it pretty much daily, preventing any kind of repairs from being made to it. Once again, another extra spicy fireworks display over there at the Antonovsky Bridge, all for the people of Kherson to enjoy. As we continue here, over here in Kherson, we see S-300 S-300 resupply was carried out earlier today. The S-300 batteries are putting in kind of overtime for the Russian Federation, and as we can see, they're taking quite a significant losses. We saw a Pantsir that was destroyed over by the Kherson Bridge, or the over by the Antonovsky Bridge. and we continue to see them trying to do whatever they can, but Russian air defenses just are not as effective as a lot of Ukrainian NATO-provided air defenses are, and it's really taking a toll on them. They're firing a lot more munitions and are not getting the hits that they need, and so many strikes are getting through their air defense systems and hitting their targets. It's really crippling the Russian capability to continue having any kind of even localized air superiority. You can take a look. So this is S-300 missiles that are en route to their actual batteries. S-300 you usually see them where they have 3 on the back. These will only allow for 2 missiles on the back of the weapon system. Eyes on the prize. While it may be bloody, Ukrainians certainly have their eyes on the prize. Today, this is from a quadcopter from Ukrainian forces. This photo, that right there, is Kherson. That is Kherson from the photo of a quadcopter drone from a Ukrainian soldier on the front line. They have their eyes on the prize, they know what they're going for, and they have it in sight. So that tells you really just how close Ukrainian troops are and how much pressure they're putting on Russian forces, kind of giving you an idea. That means they're within a few kilometers here of Kherson, of the city, and of really getting this goal. Because once Kherson falls, it's a domino. And we see that's where the majority of that bulge has been created for Ukrainian forces that are pushing towards that city and pushing towards that objective, setting the conditions for it. Here we have a comparison regarding Kherson International Airport. Ukraine. So the airport has been hit dozens of times, just countless amount of times here. It's outside Chernobivka, which if you ever see explosions happening near Chernobivka, it's probably the Kherson International Airport. So for 2 generals, dozens of helicopters and other equipment, and up to 75 soldiers. And judging by the satellite imagery, probably more information to come. So this is the Kherson International Airport before. And this is, as you can see here. And so you can see that this is what it looks like. Despite all that shelling, they have completely turned it into a giant military facility. That's probably about to stop. I can imagine that there's probably about to be quite an immense shelling at some point in the near future. I have a feeling that there will be a lot of Russian troops that will be asking themselves why they ever arrived here. And as we check out here, this is an ammunition depot that was successfully destroyed. This is coming out of Atomnia Baltka, which is in the Kherson Oblast here on the western side.
То це вже, мабуть, закінчується.
Rooster said HIMARS can reach that airport. HIMARS can reach much further than the airport. And yeah, yes they can. In fact, I believe their standard artillery can reach the airport at this point. I think they're close enough that standard artillery systems are either just out of range or are just within range of the Kherson International Airport. It's a juicy target, that's for sure. Before we move up there to Mykolaiv, we have a couple of different things down here in Crimea. First of all, large movements of equipment are spotted heading across the Kerch Bridge, which is also known as the Crimean Bridge. And I mean a massive amount. This comes as Russia is reportedly pushing in a new corps of troops. A new corps of troops means multiple battalion tactical groups, divisions put together. And that's kind of what we're seeing here. So take a look.
Прикольно, они кайфуют. Короче, открыли хрень на мосту. Наступление.
Keep in mind, they can push all this equipment they want, but they need troops to be able to actually, drive these things and operate them. And they're having quite a significant manpower shortage across all areas of the front lines. Explosions were reported in Sevastopol. We don't know whether or not this was a Ukrainian strike. All we know is that it was several explosions within Sevastopol, which is the home of the Black Sea Fleet for the Russian Federation right now. We do not have much more information regarding that, but that is currently the situation here. We can take a look. Once again, that is more explosions reported there in Sevastopol, Crimea. Jump up here to Mykolaiv. Mykolaiv was once again shelled. Very obvious that it hit civilian residential infrastructure, as we have some of these civilians reporting right out of their own homes at this point. However, we do not have any confirmation regarding any casualties as a result of the strikes.
Ночи 4 сентября 2:30 ночи прилетела. Пусть. Так, у нас нет. Вот я стою, часть стены. Вот она, разрушенная. Вырвала кусок стены. Вырвала кусок перекрытия, и кусок перекрытия лежит в дырке. Если труханет, оно может сюда еще раз вывалиться в квартиру уже.
Obviously a little bit upsetting there, as fortunately it would appear that some civilian infrastructure has been destroyed there in Mykolaiv. Over here, out of the Odessa Oblast, 13 more ships have left Ukrainian ports laden with Ukrainian agricultural products. Quote, on September 4th, 13 more ships left Ukrainian ports Odessa, Chernomorsk, and Pevdeny through the grain corridor. 282,500 tons of Ukrainian agricultural products are on board, heading to 8 countries worldwide. And that's coming from the Ministry of Infrastructure of Ukraine. So, wonderful news coming out of the Odessa Oblast to wrap up the rest of Ukraine for the night. But don't worry, we have plenty of other stuff happening throughout the world, and there's been a ton of big developments throughout the entirety of the planet. So let's go ahead and take a look and start diving down deep into some of these more international news stories. We jump over here to Moscow, where Russian news is, of course, continuing some pretty harsh rhetoric when it comes to the special military operation in Ukraine. And some of this it's a longer video, but in short, what they are talking about is that they're discussing that Ukrainian language must be banned in schools and wiped out of existence because it represents an anti-Russian ideology. going to take a short look at some of this video here.
Территории Донецких республик и на тех территориях, которые освободили. А обучение на украинском языке там сохранено. Во многих местах уже дети не знали русского языка. В общем, эта инициатива сохранить обучение на украинском языке вызвала сейчас очень горячие споры. Вот мы хотели бы об этом сейчас поговорить. Об опасности преподавания на украинском языке в школах Донбасса как раз за неделю до нового учебного года рассуждал Никита Михалков, когда он выступал на форуме педагогов в Подмосковье.
Украинский. And all they're talking about is, you know, is saying that Russian language is native to Ukrainians. Ukrainian language is always a subject of political attribution. It's an attribute, a manifesto. It's an attempt to prove I am not Russian. Uzbeks and Armenians don't need such a manifesto because they actually have their own cultures. In Kazan, we have Tatar schools, our education. Yeah. So that's, you know, talking about, yeah, let's wipe out their entire language. By the way, that's genocide. That's more genocide rhetoric. Believe it or not. I mean, let's look at this up again. Legal definition of genocide. And let's go to the United Nations. Once again, let's bring up what genocide is. All right, genocide. Once again, this is according to the Rome Statute, by the way. The Rome Statute is the statute that creates and defines the International Criminal Court, which is the one which would prosecute for a special tribunal regarding war crimes. And it is, as such, Article 2, that in the present convention, genocide means any of the following acts committed with intent to destroy in whole or in part a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group, such as killing members of the group, causing seriously bodily harm and mental harm to members of the group, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part, imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group, and forcibly transferring children of the group to another group. Well, we've already covered one of these, and that would be the forceful transfer of children, which has occurred between the occupied areas of Ukraine and Russia. Killing members of the group. That's pretty self-explanatory. That's happening daily as the Russians continue to shell civilian locations, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group. So that once again goes into the immense amount of, you have to think for every death, the immense amounts of casualties that are non-deaths, the people that are wounded. Finally, we have deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part. Ukrainian. The Ukrainian language. Failing to teach entire generations of people the Ukrainian language so that it dies out as a language would be bringing about conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction, as it completely erases the identity of that group. And remember that that genocide is the act of destroying a national, ethnic, or in whole or in part, a group of a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group. Ukrainian is a national group. Yes, we can agree. Ukraine is a nation. Okay, so a national. You could also say Ukrainian is a group of people as an ethnicity. Yes, ethnical. Okay. And so you have two different sections in which you could go the genocide route under for the Ukrainian people. You have pretty much everything with the exception of, and not that we haven't completely disproven that, considering that there has been videos of castrations on the internet of Ukrainian POWs, imposing measures to intended to prevent births within the group. We have had everything but essentially Section D in a large amount. keep in mind, these are the, guess what? These are the legal definitions under the Rome Statute for genocide. This is the United Nations. Please go look. This is the United Nations. www.un.org. This is in English, genocide prevention /genocide.shtml. This is the United Nations website. You cannot get the legal definition any better than this. So, yes, so once again, that language alone is genocidal. It is irking on the genocide of a people. Do you know what genocide comes from? Do you know how that term came to be? Genocide was coined by a Jew who survived the Holocaust because there were no other words in the English language in the world to describe the horrendousness of the Holocaust. Genocide was created as a word to describe what had happened because of the Nazis, because of the Third Reich. Once again, by the way, Ukraine isn't Nazi. Ukraine isn't Nazi. Just by basic precedence, it's not Nazi. Nazi is an acronym. For those that don't know, Nazi is an acronym. It stands for the National German Socialist Workers' Party. Nazi. They're not German. They're not socialists. And they're not part of a worker party. And by the way, the first point of the day was showing Russians holding an imperialist flag in front of a Lenin statue, Sieg hailing a photo. I just want to remind you of, in fact, we'll just... First point of the day. Genocidal is what this is. This is the mentality that perpetrates genocide and perpetrates horrendous war crimes throughout the entirety of the planet. I just also would like to point out that in Mali, the Wagner Group, which is a Russian mercenary organization, slaughtered a bunch of civilian people, dumped them into a mass grave at a recently evicted French military location, tried to blame the French, but they were caught on French drone footage. They're willing to just go out, murder local people, and try to blame it on another country. In a third world nation. In case anyone forgot that, we aired that on here. Anyway, over here in Germany, Germany is going to be giving aid to internally displaced persons inside of Ukraine. Germany will allocate £200 million to Ukraine for internally displaced persons, or IDPs. The German government said, according to the UN, since the beginning of the war, about 7 million Ukrainians have left their homes and left for other regions. Almost half of them have lost their income. And there you go. That's coming right there out of Germany for you guys. That allows us to move over here and... Whoop. Yeah. Well, that allows us to move over here and into the Middle East. Over here on the West Bank, 8 people were injured after their bus was shot at. 7 Israeli soldiers and 1 civilian were injured during an ambush of a bus. 1 soldier was in critical condition. The incident occurred on a highway near the city of Hamra. The criminals in the pickup caught up with the bus and opened fire on it. After the bus stopped, they doused it in gasoline and tried to set it on fire. Soon, the security forces detained the 2 attackers, and the 3rd is wanted. No one has yet taken responsibility for the incident.
כן,
As we jump up here into Syria, an Mi-8 helicopter belonging to the Syrian National Army ended up crashing outside of Hama, Syria. This led to the death of the entire crew of 3, including an officer, who was likely the pilot. There's the remnants of the Mi-8 helicopter, which ended up, looks like it crashed right there in the downtown of Hama. As we jump up here, this is in Azerbaijan. A bus filled with tourists got into an accident here. This serious accident occurred on the 45th kilometer of the Lakhara and Larik highway within the Larik province, Azerbaijan, near the village of Gunashli. The bus with residents crashed into concrete barriers on the side of the road. As a result of loss of control, 8 people died as a result of the incident. The injured were taken to the Lakran Regional Central Hospital for medical assistance. You can see what's left of that bus there. Not a whole lot. Pretty flattened. As we jump up here into Kazakhstan, forest fires are getting out of control up here in Kazakhstan. They're currently raging. An area of the fire area has reached more than 43,000 hectares, roughly 166 square miles or 430 square kilometers. Extinguishing the fires is difficult because of the heat and strong winds within the area now that are keeping the fire going and causing it to rampage even more. And as we jump down here, we go to Taiwan. Taiwan is going to be sending out, or is going to be deploying some anti-drone weaponry. Taiwan's Ministry of National Defense announced the deployment of anti-drone weapons on the offshore islands of Kinmen and Matsu, following several incidents with unmanned aerial vehicles flown in from China. And that is the drone's vision. It looks pretty crazy, but this is an actual thing. It's Skynet Drones Vision. First of all, why do we toy fate by naming something Skynet? Why? Why do we tempt fate with that? There is an entire series of movies to tell us why that's a bad idea. As we jump over Africa today, and then we continue over here. What we end up seeing is we end up in Atlanta, where the CDC is recommending the first boost, or the first updated COVID-19 booster. This came in from 9/1. Dr. Rochelle P. Walensky endorsed the CDC Advisory Committee on the Immunization Practices, or the ACIP, recommendations for the use of the updated COVID-19 boosters from Pfizer BioNTech for people ages 12 years and older, and for the Moderna for people ages 18 and older. These two COVID boosters added Omicron BA4 and BA5 spike protein components to the current vaccine composition, helping to restore protection that was waned since previous vaccination by targeting variants that are more transmissible and immune evading. This is coming from the COVID-19 guidelines here from the Centers of Disease Control and Prevention. And of course, the federal Food and Drug Agency. As we jump up here, this is in Saskatchewan province within Canada, specifically in the city of Regina. We see that the Canadian Mounted Police, the Mounties, reported a stabbing occurring in the Saskatchewan province, with 10 people having been killed and at least 15 having been hospitalized. The Mounties said that they found 13 incident locations in South Smith Cree Nation and Weldon. The suspects are identified as Damian Sanderson and Miles Sanderson and are still at large. The Royal Canadian Mounties alerted and advised residents in the Regina area to take precautions by sheltering in place. Do not leave a secure location. Use caution allowing others into your residence. Do not approach suspicious persons. Do not pick up hitchhikers. Report suspicious persons, emergencies, or info at 2911. Do not disclose police locations. Let me take a look. So if you are from Canada, specifically in the Saskatchewan province, and you see either of these two men, I highly recommend contacting the Royal Canadian Mounties. And here's that emergency alert as well. And that allows us to move into the kind of good news for the day. There's a couple of different interesting things that has been happening throughout the world. And so the first thing we take a look is, this is kind of interesting. This is China's new solar-powered near-space UAV. And it has made its maiden flight today. China's independently developed QMX-50, a large solar-powered near-space unmanned aerial vehicle, or UAV, made its first successful maiden flight in Yulin province. The QMX-50 took off at about 5:50 p.m. local time and landed safely after a 26-minute flight. The aircraft systems components were all in good condition after the flight. Its first high-altitude, low-speed UAV with super high aspect ratio, the first large UAV model with a twin fuselage configuration, the first large all-electric UAV platform solely driven by solar power, developed by UVIC. The QMX-50 large UAV can carry out high-altitude, long-endurance flight missions by using efficient and green solar power. It can carry out a diverse airborne missions, including high-altitude reconnaissance, forest fire monitoring, atmospheric environment monitoring, geographical mapping, and communications relay, among others. So this is just like a video of this aircraft, apparently. Like one of those 3D rendered ones. So. And you can see, this is an actual photo of the aircraft taking off. As we jump down here over to Uganda, about 40,000 people participated in a cancer marathon here in Uganda at the Rololo Independence Grounds here in Kampala for the 11th annual cancer marathon, which attracted over 40,000 participants. SAH 1.1 billion has been mobilized for the construction of a cancer center with the construction of a cancer center of excellence here within the nation of Uganda. That is a ton of people that are getting ready to run this marathon. If you want more information, you can check out the Nile Post. Or over here, this is the Ugandan Rotary Cancer Organization. If it's going to bring it up for me. It may not. Oh well, so it happens. And then finally, to wrap up the night, we end up back here at the Goddard Space Flight Center here, which is NASA's Space Flight Center in Goddard, Maryland. And that's because Jupiter's beauty has been revealed in true color image by a Juno flyby. New images captured by NASA's Juno Jupiter Explorer taken during its 43rd close flyby of Jupiter reveals features in the turbulent atmosphere of the solar system's largest planet in the same colors of a human observer would see them. The spacecraft was at a distance of 3,300 miles or 5,300 kilometers from the tops of the gas giant's clouds when the image was taken, zipping by at 130,000 miles per hour or 209,000 kilometers per hour. Citizen scientist Bjorn Johnson processed the raw data from the Juno to create two images. The image on the left hand shows the view as it would appear to a human observer in Juno's position. And the image on the right, Johnson digitally enhanced color saturation and contrast, allowing the intricate structure of the planet atmosphere to come to the forefront. The color differences in the enhanced image reflect variations in chemical compositions of different parts of Jupiter's atmosphere, and that reveals the three-dimensional nature of the powerful storms that swirl within the planet's clouds. So this is what it would look like to the human eye, and this is where it is if it's been digitally enhanced. So that's pretty cool. And if you want more info, you can always go and check it out there on Live Science. Well, that is actually all of the news for the night. There's been a ton of stuff that has been happening. And luckily we were able to get 3 different points of at least interesting news and cool, kind of good news too. For those that are interested in the Artemis 1 moon missions, the Artemis 1 did not have any updates today. Neither NASA didn't release anything on any of their stuff. They didn't even release it on the Artemis 1 mission site, so or their official mission Twitter and everything. So there hasn't been any updates regarding that. We don't know what they're planning on doing. Supposedly the next launch window is tomorrow, but we will just have to see. I don't know what the situation is with that. But overall, I hope that you guys have, if you didn't at least enjoy, then I hope that you at least learned something, found this stream knowledgeable tonight. There's been a ton of stuff that's been happening. A lot of stuff in general is not good. It's a lot of bad, kind of depressing stuff. A lot of war and death and famine and accidents and terrorism and, just kind of bad stuff overall, right? But the good news is that you guys have built a pretty awesome community here at the New News, which I cannot thank you guys enough about. I really cannot. And that's because here at the New News, we never do super chats. We're never going to be doing any kind of merchandising. 100% of everything that we do is for charity. And you guys have been very supportive of all of that. So if you check out the video description below, you're going to see a ton of different links for charity. And you're going to see all of them for Ukraine and Africa and even some for the United States and cancer research and a lot of awesome things that we're trying to raise money for. That's 100% of everything that we do is trying to support these organizations. So if you can't give a lot to these organizations, give a little. If you can't give anything at all, that's perfectly okay too. Help us grow this project. The more people that come here and watch the news with us, and the more people that come here and learn something and kind of see what's happening around them, the more of an impact we'll actually have on these people that are affected by the very news that we talk about every day. One of our goals is and our main goal here on the channel is to get to the point where we can get fundraisers on every single stream that we do, and we want to be able to raise upwards of $1 million with that, and that's just to start with. So I hope that you guys will help us achieve that goal, and so far a ton of you guys have already done so. But if you can help us grow this channel, share us with your friends, share us with your co-workers, your friends, your family. Help jump on. You can join us and follow us on social media. All the links are down there as well. You can jump on our Discord. And you can also share our stuff from social media too. So I hope that you guys will do that and help continue to grow this thing. This is something I care a whole lot about, and all of us are working full time to make sure that this stays 100% charity driven, so that way we're not trying to profit off of other people's misery. But with that, I hope that you guys really enjoyed, and please be safe. Tomorrow we will not be streaming. Tomorrow we're taking the full day off. We take Mondays off every day, or every on Monday. So please be sure to just kind of hang out on our communities over on like Discord and what have you. But we will not be streaming tomorrow night. So we take a mental health day. So please go and we hope to see you back here tomorrow, or not tomorrow, but on Tuesday. On Tuesday night at about 10 p.m. Eastern Time, 9 p.m. Central. In the meantime, I hope that you remain safe, that you and your families are safe, and if not, I hope that you find that safety and security in the very near future. I really don't want any of you to be part of those statistics. But other than that, we hope we will see you back here. We hope that we have a lot of good news coming in on Tuesday. And for those in the United States, please enjoy your Labor Day. It's going to be Labor Day here tomorrow. But with that, have a great night, everybody. My name is Paul from the New News.
Going home, Russian soldiers, going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стріляти волновах, і чудно кличе діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Нам не треба ні конфлікту, ні війни. Та ми готові всіх вас звать до сатани. Тисячі вже полягло, і все більше шлейфуємо. Тут для них нема нічого, крім труни. Going home, Russian soldiers, going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стріляти волновах, і чудно кличе діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Вызволять пришел, братишка, ну привет. На моей земле тебе один ответ. Нашим людям с кирпичом, даже танки и бачок. Вам не взять нас и за 100 тысяч лет. Going home, Russian soldiers, going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стріляти волновах, і чудно кличе діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО.
Mr. Putin, on behalf of all our guys, no one's scared of your nuclear device. You can take your double lemon, shove it up your wrinkled bum. Oh, we'll come and help you fit it in your skull.
Going home, Russian soldiers, going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стріляти волновах, і чудно кличе діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Going home, Russian soldiers, going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стріляти волновах, і чудно кличе діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Going home, Russian soldiers, going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стріляти волновах, і чудно кличе діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Going home, Russian soldiers, going home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. І стріляти волновах, і чудно кличе діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Ідіть нахуй.